thank the member. The question before the chair is the bill be now read a second time. I give the call to the member for Forrest.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I certainly support the government's defence amendment call out the ADF bill in front of us today. And as you would understand, Deputy Speaker, the world today, and the members in this House know, the world today is a very different place to that which existed in 1903 when this type of legislation was formed. The threats we face today are, unfortunately, greater and far more complex than those of many years ago and even in 1903. Essentially, this bill makes it easier for the state and territory governments to request ADF support in circumstances of a terrorist attack. These amendments complement the practical measures already being rolled out by our government to enhance the ADF support to national counter-terrorism arrangements. As we all know and as we've seen all too regularly, both overseas and in Australia, acts of terrorism are hugely challenging. And you think of the truck attack in Nice and the attacks in London, the Lindt Cafe siege in Sydney, and the hijacking of a commercial airline or a mass casualty or mass hostage event. When incidents such as these happen, local police are put under an enormous pressure, and they respond and react very, very well. But often long and drawn-out or multiple perpetrator and multiple location attacks require perhaps additional and specific responses. Under our Constitution, the circumstances where the Commonwealth, through the Australian Defence Force, could step in were very, very limited. And they did, as I started to say, dated back to 1903 and were set out in the Defence Act. Laws were tweaked somewhat in 2000 prior to the Sydney Olympics to ensure that the New South Wales Police had sufficient federal support to provide what was described, as we all know, as the best Olympics ever. But unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, as we're aware, the world keeps changing, and certainly since the end of 2000. We all remember the events in 2001. We've all experienced the impact they've had around the world, not just in air travel, but airport security, security in public transport, and security even here in Parliament House. As has been said before, and the government's first duty, any government's first duty, is to protect its citizens. And we have a very proud and enviable record of national security, as well as supporting our men and women in uniform. And I would say that includes our Defence Force people, as well as our people in our local and state police. Whether it's in supporting troops here or overseas, or even with our local police. And for those of us who live and work in regional areas and see the extraordinary work done by our local police, with our own families in our own communities, I acknowledge and thank them for what they do every single day. So, with the details to this bill, the bill implements the recommendations of the review of defence support to domestic counter-terrorism arrangements, and that was announced by the Prime Minister in July of 2017. And the government initiated the review in response to the changing nature of the threat demonstrated by the attacks around the world, and we've seen so many of those. And the key factor in launching the review was actually the Lindt Cafe siege in Sydney, which was one of the most significant terrorist incidents in Australia's history. The resultant inquiries, including the coronial inquest, found, among other things, that the option to call out the ADF in support of the New South Wales Police was considered but actually rejected due to the complexity of the process and the criteria involved. Well, this bill seeks to change those criteria. The government is keen to ensure that states can and continue to determine when to call on the ADF to assist in a way that is rapid and effective, that's predictable, that's transparent, but ultimately where it would be beneficial to a potential situation. The changes in this bill remove the threshold requirement that says states are not or unlikely to be able to protect themselves or Commonwealth interest against the domestic violence. Changes will also require that in deciding whether to call out the ADF, Commonwealth authorising ministers consider the nature of the violence and whether specifically ADF support would be likely to enhance the state or territory's ability to protect itself or Commonwealth interests. It's a key issue. Police and other emergency services are and will remain our first responders in this country. It is the immediate responses and actions of these first responders that can and often does have the greatest impact in terms of saving lives, protecting people and neutralising any threats. Each state and territory police force has specifically trained personnel who have capabilities, expert capabilities, to respond to terrorist attacks. However, there are times, and I suspect, I hope, not on Australian soil, but we, as we know, have to be prepared for whatever may befall us, that we have to be prepared for what may be ahead. And there may be times when state and territory police actually need additional support to respond in the most effective manner. And I see some young people in the gallery today listening to this, and all of us in this chamber desperately hope that there is not a major terrorist incident in Australia that affects any of you. And the reason we make the laws in this place is to protect young people and people of all ages just like yourselves. And while the Australian Defence Force primary counter-terrorism role is offshore, the ADF has personnel, resources, specialist skills and assets that can assist our emergency services to respond in the event of a terrorist attack. And the support can include capabilities such as tactical assault forces, any form of response and recovery that's required. For this reason, it's really essential that the Defence Forces are actually able and enabled to contribute effectively to our domestic counter-terrorism efforts in every environment. And in all honesty, we do not know what's ahead. Some of the threats and risks we're aware of, but some are yet to unfold. There are a number of key underlying principles that inform the operation of the amended call-out provisions. The ADF should only be called out to assist civilian authorities. And if the ADF is called out, civilian authorities will remain paramount, but the ADF members remain under military command. And when called out, ADF members can only use force that is reasonable and necessary in all of the circumstances. And they remain subject to the law and are accountable for their actions. Now, these factors do not limit the range of matters that authorising ministers can take into account. The amendments here will allow states and territories to request that the Commonwealth call out the ADF in a broader range of circumstances, making the process what we need, which is more flexible and responsible to the needs of states and territories, whilst at the same time recognising and respecting each state and territory's different requirements. Importantly, the amendments do not mean that the ADF will be called out to respond to every threat. However, they will be given greater flexibility to respond to the wide range of threats that may arise, and we hope don't arise, but we have to be prepared for, and the range of response capabilities of every jurisdiction. It will also give responding state or territory authorities more flexible options to deal with an incident. They will make the call. Deputy Speaker, recent terrorist attacks in cities like Paris and London have also prompted a reassessment of the scope of the ability to pre-authorise call-outs of the ADF. It's known traditionally as the contingent call-out. Commonwealth ministers to pre-authorise the ADF to respond if specific circumstances arrive. This removes any potential delay, which is so critical. Time is critical in these situations. And we've seen that repeatedly, how important time and timing is. To remove any potential delay in seeking ministerial authorisation to act once an incident is actually taking place. and it enables the ADF to already be on the scene, ready to assist the police response. Contingent call-out is presently limited only to aviation and the protection of Commonwealth interests. From the passage of this bill, these amendments will extend contingent call-out to be available to protect state and territory interests, whether they are on the land, in the air or in the maritime domain. And in the light of the current threat environment, where terrorist incidents can be over in the matter of minutes, these amendments provide additional options when planning for and dealing with anticipated terrorist threats. In the case that terrorist threats can be highly mobile and can occur in multiple locations simultaneously, that is what we are dealing with. It's more than conceivable that a threat may arise in one jurisdiction and rapidly move to another. It's therefore critical that legislative arrangements do not hinder an ADF response in this context. These amendments will enhance the ability of the ADF to respond to incidents across state or territory borders by allowing for call-out orders to authorise the ADF to operate in multiple jurisdictions as well as an offshore area. The government recognises the importance of the ADF working cooperatively alongside state and territory authorities by increasing the consultation requirements to work closely with first responders if called out. Under these amendments, the ADF will be required to consult with every state and territory affected by a call-out order to the extent possible in those circumstances. They also require that the ADF be utilised only in accordance with the written requests of the police force of the jurisdiction in which the ADF is operating. Again, clarifying the circumstances where the ADF is involved and limits on their involvement. The bill further clarifies the powers of the ADF members that may be exercised by organising the powers into three distinct divisions. They will apply both on and offshore areas to facilitate the ADF's ability to respond to multi-jurisdictional incidents and to streamline the legislation. One important addition is the inclusion of the Minister for Home Affairs as a named alternative minister. Under the existing legislation, an extraordinary emergency and expedited call-out can be made by the Prime Minister acting alone, or, if the Prime Minister is unable to be contacted, the Minister for Defence and Attorney-General acting together. If only one of the authorising ministers can be contacted, an expedited call-out order can be made either by the Minister for Defence or Attorney-General together with an alternative minister, including the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister for Foreign Affairs or the Treasurer. And following the reorganisation of the security agencies into the Home Affairs portfolio, the Minister for Home Affairs now plays a key role in counter-terrorism coordination. And there are a number of National Security Committee of Cabinet with important security agencies falling within the Home Affairs portfolios. And these amendments will add to the Minister for Home Affairs as a named alternative minister for the purposes simply of that expedited call-out. In conclusion, Deputy Speaker, it's a dreadful statement of fact that the world has changed, and many of us in this place are very concerned about what's ahead. It's changed significantly since 1903, and it's changed even more significantly since 2000. And one of our most important duties as a government, and the most important duty, is to keep our citizens safe. The measures in this bill will ensure that Defence's specialist counter-terrorism capabilities are readily available to states and territories if and when they are appropriate and needed. It will ensure the most rapid response possible, which is absolutely critical given the importance of timing and equally the current threat environment. It represents a huge improvement to the Commonwealth's ability to support national counter-terrorism arrangements. And while we in this place hope they actually never need to be utilised, these changes, if they're needed, will help save Australians' lives in the event of a significant domestic terrorism threat. I commend the Attorney-General for his work and I commend the bill to the House.